Hi, I'm Peter Tumminello. I'd like to welcome you all to this talk on crystal structures in radar. On this auspicious day, which is the winter solstice in the southern hemisphere and the summer solstice in the north. So some of you may already be familiar with this idea. You may have a copy of my book. You may have read something about it in some other publication. It's a really great thing for me now for people to have it available on a repertory platform. And it has been included in the families in radar. So I'm going to assume you don't know anything about it. And so I'm going to give a brief rundown on the structures themselves. And mind you, this is a subject that I normally do over 8 2-hour webinars. It's an in-depth study if you really want to grasp it and use it well. It does have some exceptional advantages if you decide to do this, which I'll discuss with you during the talk. So let's start off with a place we're all familiar with. And that place is Graphite. You will all know it, more or less. You'll all have studied it or have had cases. If you've had a case or cases that are significant cases, then all the better. So you're also familiar with how it looks and what it's like. It's the stuff that they use to make pencils. It is soft and greasy by its very nature. It acts on the skin. Graphite is in eczema is a famous indication. And for those people, there's a tendency to be slow, and there's a tendency for it to be indicated for mothers who are weepy and fathers who are hardworking. Those indications come out of Sholton's work, and they're very true and very nice perceptions of many of the Graphite's typologies. So I'm going to go a step further and talk about diamond. So diamond immersion, the diamond preparation that I made from the whole diamond. You're all familiar with diamonds, some more than others, according to your tastes. An interesting comparison to graphite is it's the hardest of all substances. It's all naturally occurring substances. It acts on bone and nerve. Those people that need it are classically fast or sharp with the intellect or in their actions. They're often high-performing individuals, often highly successful. And a classic feature of the diamond immersion story is being devastated by loss. So if you just think more deeply, and I'm sure some of you already cottoned onto this, these are both the same substance, pure carbon. They're nothing else but carbon. So what makes them different? And I can tell you there is one definitive perception about these respective substances which categorizes them beautifully. The fact is that there is a crystal structure for each of these, and it's different. So it's the nature of the hexagonal structure that makes carbon into graphites. And it's the nature of the cubic crystal structure. They both have crystal structures. You'd be aware of that with diamond, but maybe not with graphites. They both have crystal structures. It's the nature of the cubic crystal structure that makes carbon a diamond. So the science is the deeper difference in the character of the carbon can be viewed through the looking glass of crystal structure. So I took this idea further. I was inspired by a famous mineralogist and crystal healer, a man named Michael Ginger. And I realized that every gemstone had a crystal structure, and understanding that crystal structure made a difference to my understanding of gemstones, and that's all I was particularly interested in the first instance. It was soon pointed out to me by homeopathic colleagues that all minerals and all organic compounds crystallize. And at the time, that was about 40% of the materia medica. It's probably a little less now because so many plants have come forward. It's still, as you would know, a major chunk of our materia medica. So as it turns out, this idea of crystal structure has a relevance to all of these remedies. So I'm going to have to let you into the idea of crystal structure and what it is here. Firstly, I have to say to you, crystal structures are based on 7 distinct geometric shapes. Those shapes are really fundamental shapes, and shapes that you're all familiar with. Only those 7 discrete linear shapes are able to completely fill a space without leaving any separation between the singular images. So if you put a whole lot of triangles together and you put them upside down to one another, they completely fill the space. Squares, it's easy to see how they fill the space. Rectangles, easy to see how they fill the space. Those basic geometrics are fundamental to what crystal structure is. As it turns out, these fundamental shapes mathematically govern all crystallization, and hence we can understand crystal structure, or we can begin to understand crystal structure through understanding the shapes and studying the shapes themselves. So Michael Ginger at first discovered that each structure has a personality type. He called it a lifestyle type. I did deeper work with it through homeopathic cases and homeopathic provings over 10 years. And this is the fundamental idea that I've come up with in human beings. Each crystal structure equates to a specific psycho-emotional setting or structure of the consciousness. Fascinating stuff. I just threw myself into this for 10 years. Clinically, through provings, and through reading many, many cured cases. I read many references about crystals and crystal structures. And it was interesting, there had been people before me besides Michael Gingo in the realm of crystal healing who would understand that there's something going on here. Here's a nice quote: "The lattice-like structure of crystals could well relate to the geometry that exists at the deepest level of the psyche." That's from Psyche and Matter by Marie-Louise von Franz, who was a collaborator of Jung. Jung himself wrote about the significance of crystals in his work. And many people who have been on the edge of science, let's say, have understood that there's a link between crystals, crystal structure, life, life force, and thought processes. So the work that I've introduced is all about that, integrating the understanding of crystal structure with homeopathic medicine. So let me go through the structures with you. Just to preempt, I've mentioned there's 7 geometric structures. That's fixed throughout the universe. Whatever crystallizes has to be one of those structures. There is an 8th group, which is the group that doesn't have any structure at all. They're like your wild card. Every pack needs a wild card. And we'll talk about that too. So we'll talk about 8 in total. So cubic, easy, it's the square. A few ideas about it, because we've only got a short time here. I'm just going to give you a few very core ideas about each structure. There's also, besides the square, there's a 3D view of this stuff, once you get a little deeper into it. So the 3D, of course, for cubic is a cube. The square goes to the cube. And the character of people that need remedies that have this crystal structure is all about rigidity, black and white. Perfectionism is outstanding in this structure. The logical mind is at the forefront of their psyche. 1 and 1 is 2, you know. It's really logical. Things are straightforward for them. Either it's scientific, it's logical, or no. They tend to be very orderly. I've given each of the structures a life motif in the form of a life statement. It's sort of like an essence or that I've boiled it all down to. It's a really good and core starting place about the nature of these people's psyche. And for cubic, it's I am. Who I am is really important, my identity. They have either very, very highly formed identity or big issues about their identity. A remedy that forms in the crystal structure of cubic is gold or a metallicum. Another one is salt, Napmer, the cubic crystals of Napmer. In Napmer, it's all about dwelling on the past and being locked into the past. It's the rigidity of that. And Arsalb, I don't have to tell you how rigid they are. I was very excited when I found that Arsalb was cubic, seeing that they're so meticulous and need everything to be really right. Remember Arsalb? Album means white, so this is the white oxide of arsenic. Pure arsenic doesn't form into the same structure, it forms into a completely different one. But our arsenicum album is cubic every time. He's an interesting cubic guy, Picasso. He had a will, an inalienable will, whatever he wanted, he got, for better or for worse. The second structure is tetragonal. So the tetragon is what we know as the triangle, as the rectangle. It's a rectangular prism in the 3D. They also have perfectionism, but it's a different type of perfectionism. So this is all about the external world and how things look, how they appear, and how they're presented. This is the really big deal for tetragonal. What happens is the inside suffers because of this. They tend to like to hide things and cover up. So there's sometimes honesty issues or narcissism because it all looks so good on the outside. On the bright side, they can be very analytical and attend to detail in an extraordinary way. These are people who are very good at technology or very good at the letter of the law. Their motif, I analyze. A typical or a prominent tetragonal remedy is tin, stenum metallicum. Interestingly, Scholten talks about the mask of formality when he talks about stenum. Apophyllite is a crystal that crystallizes in the tetragonal structure, and one that I've been, because of understanding tetragonal, a remedy that I've been able to use in a number of serious cases that have been cured, who are people who are tetragonal by nature. The crystal you probably don't know. I didn't know before I got into this stuff. And I found out about tetragonal structure. I had to have a look at some unusual, what people would think is unusual crystals. It's got 4 sides, unlike a quartz, which has 6. Okay. There's some art from a tetragonal artist. It's Caravaggio. Caravaggio's famous for doing photographic type images of the great detail of humanity. It's so interesting in this picture that even the looks and expressions on the participants' faces are almost photographic. And it certainly is graphic. Next is the hexagon. As you can see, these shapes are all quite simple and straightforward, but have their own special character. And there is an order to them. which you would have to read in the book or come to one of my courses to really understand the depth of. So there's a hexagon, the hexagonal prism. Interesting character of the hexagonal people is goal-oriented. They have their eyes on the ball. Of course, when you want to achieve a goal, the issues that come up are whether you have the power to do it, whether you have the power, the strength to do it. So that's an issue for them. They're very good at teamwork. And an interesting dimension of hexagonal that I discovered from seeing a series of emerald cases, which is hexagonal, is about conflict in relationship. So it's all about the yin and the yang, about oppositional or complementary or polarized relationships. The motif, I do. They're action-packed people. Or they could be suffering from, I want to be action-packed, but I haven't got it. A few remedies that are hexagonal by nature. This one you'll know, it's calcium phosphate. Calcium phosphate crystallizes into the hexagonal structure. There it is as a crystal, micro and macro. Of course, we use it as a powder, but it still has the character of hexagonal in it. And there's a famous hexagonal crystal, which of course is emerald. Which I now understand is polycrest in homeopathic practice. Extraordinary remedy. There's a guy who is focused on the goal, winning every time. You can often see it in their eyes. The fourth one is trigonal, the triangle. So I won't go into the details of how trigonal forms. It's a little bit complex. The triangle is the core of it. Interesting dimensions of trigonal is that they have a great relationship to the group. And so hierarchy can be important for them. They can be insecure, hence the group is a nice place. They often need protection or feel ungrounded. And their need is to become self-possessed, to express themselves as an individual without losing the group. The motto, the motif is, I think these people are really good with perspective. The quartz crystal, silica in homeopathy, standard homeopathy is trigonal remedy. You know, these shapes are so firmly or deeply implanted and imprinted on crystallization. Here's an example of an internal picture of a crystal. This is the same type of crystal. They're both tourmalines, which are trigonal. You know, there it is in nature, making virtually perfect triangular shapes. Magnificent. There's someone who, this has got nothing to do with politics, but someone who was thoughtful, yeah, perspective, tried to get perspective in making decisions. The fifth one is rhombic, the rhombus. It also makes a prism. None of the faces are equal. None of the three major faces are equal. Interesting structure. We're moving into a whole different ball game now from the other structures, where for those first four, thinking and the mental processes are up there. Yeah. For the next four, it's the feeling processes. These people tend to be deep feeling and closed. They tend to be accommodating of others. There's an instinctual power within them, often they're at the behest of that instinctual power. For better or for worse. And they tend to be sympathetic. Mind you, it doesn't mean that they don't have a brain, okay? These people can be highly intelligent, but it's the feeling that dominates the character. The motif is I feel. Golden topaz, one of the remedies that I introduced in 12 Jewels, is a deeply rhombic remedy. And I was fascinated to find that pure iodine, iodium, in homeopathy is a orthorhombic remedy. I solved a lot of questions in my mind when I discovered that this was the case. A whole lot of pieces fell into place. So we'll go on, we're getting nearer the end. Monoclinic, another basic shape, the parallelogram. This is an odd one. It's the slanty one. Instability, you know, just looking at it gives you the feeling of instability. Just looking at the shapes or taking the shapes in is an avenue to learning about the structures, actually. Self-expression is important to them. These are the people that must become artistic, passionate, inspiring. Their motif, I move, I express. Phosphorus is the only element, only pure element, which is monoclinic. One of the gemstones that's monoclinic, nephrite jade. The last of the linear structures relates to the trapezium. It's called triclinic. Amongst the internal axes, unlike the cube relating to aurum, the internal axes here, none of them are in order. Everything is in disorder. These are people that have conditions like what I call multiple misalignment, means their life is really out of order. It's really hard for them to get what I call the main vectors of life: work, relationships, and sense of self. Really hard for them to get all that together or to hold it together. Often they're in a topsy-turvy state. It's easy for them to become alienated or disoriented, sometimes often they lose trust in life. There are positives with all these structures, which I really haven't got time to go into now. And I'm really just doing this just to give you the breadth and the depth of what this is about. Their motif, I react. Turquoise has this triclinic structure. It's a remedy for great tragedy, or the experience of great tragedy. And labradorite is a gemstone you might know that has this structure. Lastly, amorphous, no structure. So we've done the 7 linears. This is the one where, you know, when you look into it, there is no crystallization. So the circle is the best descriptor for this. This is for people who are disassociated, where there's destruction or dissolution, where there's flux or transformation, where there's extraordinary creativity, because they're not locked into anything. The motif is I change. Some remedies. All the opals are amorphous. They don't have a crystal structure. That's what they look like on the inside. A whole lot of little balls all stacked together. No straight lines. And in standard homeopathy, alumina is amorphous. Just letting all that information, I realised it was intense. Just sink into the background. This is a vehicle. Understanding structure is a vehicle that enables one to understand the character, the whole turn of mind and feeling. As it turns out, at the core, each person has a singular structure. Doesn't mean that others can't appear, but at the core, a singular structure. Some of the benefits of using crystal structure. Its highly definitive characteristic is recognizable in normal behavior and history. So one doesn't often have to go to great lengths to actually perceive the structure, especially if you're well studied in it. It's definitive inroad to prescribing minerals, crystals, and organic compounds. They all have a crystal structure and are, to some degree, dominated by it, as well as for a compound, let's say magnesium phos, as well as the magnesium and the phos element, there's the way they come together, and that's governed by crystal structure. It ties together all the loose ends of mineral compounds. So let's say you have a manganum case. Question, which manganum? Manganum aceticum, manganum sulfuricum, manganum phosphoricum, manganum silicatum, manganum muriaticum, manganum carbonicum. Crystal structure helps differentiate between all these. I don't know if you know, but there are 3 nat sulfs in homeopathy. That's there. It's sodium and sulfur compounds. They all have different crystal structures, hence differentiation. Yeah. Little did I know, but they have a relevance to plants and animal medicines. I think it's because of the earth element that is consistent through all of manifestation. And because of that, I'm beginning to see, and I suspected this from the beginning when I first started working with it, that there were global implications for homeopathic remedies. You know? So it appears, and the way I'm using it now, is one system that takes in all the different kingdoms. Doesn't mean I don't use other methods of analysis, don't get me wrong. Doesn't supplant everything else, but it's something that ties everything together. So benefits of understanding the theory. It explains the deep formative aspects of the psyche which contain the fundamental drivers of thinking and feeling. It's an extraordinary vehicle for understanding self. Much have I found out about myself, and companions, yeah. So getting the crystal structure of people about you is pretty good. Another one of my ideas that welled up, structure is the mold in which the experiences of life take a distinctive shape. You all know that we all have different responses to the same experience. That's the stuff that homeopathy is made of. And structure lets us into that. So let's talk about how it appears in radar. Actually, if there's any strong questions, I'll take them. Otherwise, I'll leave it right till the end.
There's one actually at the moment, and it's from me, Peter. I just wondered if you could say more about the earth element being consistent throughout all manifestation, because that really piqued my interest, that statement.
I think in the material universe, you can't not have the earth element. And it is part of the material manifestation, yeah, even though it might be small. So definitely the earth element, and certainly in all minerals and all plants and all animals, they don't exist without the element of earth. Yeah. It must be there for them to be in physical form like this.
To be embodied, yeah.
It becomes less as you move away from the minerals, it becomes less.
Yeah.
But it still must be there. Otherwise, you can't have a bird, even though they live in the air and very much they have a lot to do with the air.
Yeah.
And that's their natural place. You still need to understand bird themes.
Yeah.
But still you can differentiate between the different birds according to their crystal structure. I've got many nice cases of birds and I can see the different structures in them. Fascinating.
Nice. Thank you.
I really got it. I didn't really know whether it would go into things like birds, but I had a beautiful buteo case and it was just as hexagonal as anything. They were so goal oriented and so into doing it. It just wasn't funny. It was extraordinary.
Yeah.
I thought, wow,
yeah,
it's really there. And then, I looked and it was there through really lovely examples of it in Haliita's cases, and I've got a beautiful Calypteanum case, and they were all different structures. Okay.
Thank you.
So in radar. So in radar, the various structures comes up under families of remedies. So all you've got to do is go to the top left-hand corner of your screen in radar, and you'll see families, the tree. And you just click on it and you can put in structures and this will come up. Or if you've already chosen the structure, you can put in the name of the structure and it'll come up. When you get to the navigation window, you'll see all the structures come up in succession and in the order that I've just explained, which is their natural order of appearance from complex to simple. Complex being the most complex being amorphous and becoming less and less complex till it gets to the most simple in cubic. And so I've used these icons as a quick reference guide. They have significance. They're not just symbols. Yeah, they have significance. You'll see the triangle, the 6-pointed staff, a hexagonal, the rhomb, the parallelogram, and for triclinic, I chose, is that a theta? No, it's not a theta, is it? It's a omega, I think, for triclinic. So that's the way it appears in the navigation window. If you go a bit further, let's look at one of the structures. We're looking at tetragonal now, and I'll just put that up just because it's one of the shorter ones. These have different numbers of remedies in them. But it just shows you that in the repertory that, you know, the elements and minerals are grouped together. So you can see that there are tetragonal minerals, and you'll begin there with period 3 and magnesium, and magnesium fluor is the only tetragonal medicine that I could identify in that period. Yeah. And it's interesting to see that quite a few fluors come up for tetragonal. Mag fluor there, and in period 4, it's ferrum fluor and manganum fluor, also tetragonal. So you can look at the elements and minerals, you can look at the organic compounds, you can look at the plants, the animals, and I've even categorized the nosodes. They really fall beautifully into structure. And there's the organic compounds in there. Now, there are different values here, and the different values are about their probable relevance. So everything in the bold type, it means that by its very nature, it must be a mineral, first of all, and we must be absolutely sure about the crystal structure. Yeah. So magnesium fluor in period 3 is 101% sure it's tetragonal and nothing else. It's got nothing to do with any other structure. That's it, kaput, done, finished. Yeah. The same with manganum fluor, zincum bromatum, palladium oxidatum, yeah, and stenum. So you can see that some are 2 value here. That means it's highly probable. Yeah, there could be some doubt. You know, maybe we have a certain amount of information about it that strongly points to that structure, or it's not fully known yet. Yeah, but it's highly likely. And if it's as a 1 value and it's a mineral, that means it's possible that that's what the structure is. Yeah, we know from maybe 1 case. Yeah, there's a couple of ways of working out the structure. The best way, and you know, I've done a mountain of research here, and I've gone to all the crystallography journals, and they've done like endless experiments with X-ray diffraction. They've told us what the true structures are. Yeah. And when that happens, it's 101% right. Yeah. Sometimes we haven't got that. We haven't got that work. So I've needed to go to cases. And once I've got a couple of really good deep cases, the crystal structure becomes as clear as a bell. Yeah. So as you can see, all the crystals and gemstones have a really clear crystal structure. There's a few odd ones out. that one, rutilated quartz, only has a 2 value because it's 2 structures, rutile and quartz. And you'll see there, sorry, go back. You'll see there all the plants are only in as a 2 value because it's only from cases. You can't read a crystal structure straight off a plant. You can't read it off the substance. Same with animals and nosodals. If you want to go to families and key in the structure itself that you're looking for, it'll show you all the groups that appear, and you can include any one of them in a repertory or any number of them in a repertory. If you want to just do crystals and gemstones, you can just drag that into your chart. If you want just elements and minerals, you can drag that into your chart. Okay, so because we're able to apply this to the whole of the Materia Medica now, you may want to put in all hexagonal medicines. There's a special trick to do this. Yeah. You can't just drag the icon. It won't do it. You have to do a little process. It's quite straightforward once you get used to it. It is, first of all, you select the icon itself. There it is, hexagonal. You can see the little finger pointer there. I've actually selected hexagonal. Then you, whoops, right. Then you use Shift plus. When you use Shift plus, a box will come up and you put in this code /R and press on take, and every hexagonal medicine, everything that's been classified as hexagonal will fall into your repertory, yeah, as a single symptom. And then you can do whatever you want with it. You can use it to help you decide on a case, or you can use it to eliminate with according to your will. I've got a couple of short cases. These are short, making them relatively simple for you because this is early days, but this is how I use crystal structure. You have to remember that I'm well acquainted with it. It takes you a while to be well acquainted with it. If you've read the book and applied it to some cases from your own practice, i.e. you look back on cases, you'll get it. We'll talk more about studying it later. It takes 6 months to a year to sort of get it. From then on, it just grows and deepens. Eventually, you can intuit it. Although in most cases, you have to work it through. So this first case, a young man came to see me age 20. And he came for anxiety, sadness, and constipation. He was a really sensitive looking young man. And he looked like something out of a portrait, you know, from an ancient, sort of like from the 17th or 18th century. And he had a ethereal quality to him. And so the anxiety and sadness had been going on for a year. And his situation was like this. He'd started in an art course, and he said, look, I feel anxious about it. Will it lead me anywhere? And will I be able to turn it into a profession? There's a fear of not being able to make it, which is understandable as an artist. Will I end up doing something I don't like and not achieving anything, he asked me. Or at least that was the question he was posing to himself. He had a fear of cockroaches. I gave him a remedy without going into the details of it. It was zirconium metallicum. The remedy was really good. He felt much better, and the anxiety and sadness was, he didn't pay any attention to it. It was sort of there in the background, and his bowels were better, and he was going along quite well. And asked him to repeat it, and he came back and he had some interesting dreams. And the dreams went like this. He said, I've had some really potent and unusual dreams. And he said, poisonous spiders. And those poisonous spiders were falling into my eyes. Now, that sounds pretty scary to me. And then he had a room full of chocolates turning into cockroaches. Then he had another dream of maggots coming out of the cupboards. And this was all looking pretty fascinating. He was fascinated, so was I. I really didn't know what to do with this, but obviously the zirconium had unearthed something. He's never had dreams like this before. Remember, this is a sensitive young man. When I don't know what to do, I go higher in the previous remedy. So I go higher in zirconium and I give him a dose of M. He came back. It was a mess. This is some, 3 or 4 months down the track now. Panic attacks. And if he's not in panic, he's in deep depression. We'd unearthed the underlying vulnerability in the psyche through a good remedy. With the anxiety, has violent images, people covered with blood. He said, I don't know where it's coming from. He didn't have any history of abuse or violence. People get stabbed. When he's depressed, he wants to suicide by drowning. He's worse for conversing with people, especially if it's superficial. He's really fearful that he'll act out on the images. They're very intrusive, very potent. And he said, I'd rather suicide. That's why he's thinking of the suicide by drowning. So this had all the hallmarks of a person descending into psychosis or very, very heavy medication. I was worried. He was worried. His family, who used to come to see me for homeopathy, were very worried. So a repertory, sudden fears, dreams of blood, suicidal disposition by drowning, morbid impulses, meaning of life lost, everything's meaningless. Falling asleep was very difficult. The images would come very intrusively then. And there's a repertory for you. Many remedies coming up. Phosphorus, spongy is right up there. COVID-19, this was before COVID-19. I've just put this into radar recently. Lachesis is there. Coffea. Yeah, it's one of those times where you have a repertory and there's a whole lot of things that are possible, and hey, you need to get the right remedy. So I noted that in my understanding of structure, which I was fairly well developed in, it was the first sort of 5 years of me doing the research, that his state was an amorphous state. So things coming out of the unknown, coming out of left field, is part of amorphous. So there's no structure to them. Violence and destruction themselves are a deep part of amorphous, because that's what happens with change and transformation. You have to let go of something, something has to die. So amorphous. So I threw in the amorphous structure, and immediately something moves far up the ladder in terms of its place in the hierarchy. Phosphorus is still number one. But alumina goes from about number 15 to number 3. And because it has the blood component quite strongly, not quite as strongly as phosphorus does, but because it has the blood component quite strongly and it has morbid impulses, along with amorphous, I wasn't going to give him anything other than an amorphous remedy. I gave alumina. Eliminating on amorphous made alumina number 1. And these remedies, alumina, hyoscyamus, belladonna, haliotis, alcoholus, hydrogen, they are the only remedies I would have considered, because I knew the character of the condition was an amorphous state where all structure is lost. Well, I had to give him alumina for 6 months. But it was fast and deep acting. The panic attacks, the fear of doing violence, the sleeping difficulty all abated. There were ups and downs during the 6 months, but the general trend was up, yes. As it went through, he didn't react so strongly, so no suicidal thoughts. He started to paint again because he had just stopped doing anything for some months. And he started to do well again at his art school, became activated in his art. His dreams moved away from being horrendous to being dreams of painting and dreams of friends. You know, his family wrote me a letter at the end, and they said, we thought we'd lost him. They were so scared. So alumina, with the help of the understanding of the amorphous structure, so I'm quite present to the fact that Our time is virtually at an end, and there's still a few things to say. I could do another case, but we probably haven't got time for it. The other case was an emerald case, where I show how structure works with the gemstone remedies. But I think you've probably got an idea. I'm just going to roll on just to the finishing part. Grasping the structures. Please don't try and do it quickly. Reading the book and doing one structure at a time without trying to go through all the structures and do a comparison, unless you have a very broad and expansive mind. Just do one at a time and do reflections on it, either through art, which I recommend. I recommend various films and various types of art, you know, that you can watch, or looking at your cases, your already cured cases, or the cured cases of other homeopaths, before you move on to the next structure is really, really important. Otherwise, it's just a massive information. Doing one of my courses, we're in the middle now of doing recordings, which people will be able to buy of various, me doing each of the structures with cases. There's my book, which was written in 2017, which dives into the structures with cases, with recommendations of studying art and culture and personality types. You could go and get a brief resume of the structures. I do have a chart with the keywords of the structures on them. That's all. This is all published by Narayana in Germany. That chart has colours on the other side, my understanding of the relevance of colours in clinical practice. And there's a chart inside that has the alignment of crystal structure and colour and which gemstones are indicated, if you're into prescribing gems. It's a really worthwhile study if it takes your attention. There are many things to study in homeopathy and many systems. And you have to follow your gut on that, because trying to do it all, there's not many people that can get their head around it. You know, if this rings bells for you or has resonance for you, go for it. You know? But don't let it go inside of a year or two. You know? Otherwise, you won't get it.